Hello everyone. Before we are going to discuss our assigned topic, let me introduce first our names. I am Glenn El Diego, and together with me is Princess May Albon and Chris Jenbert Mundido, who are members of the Group 1. So today we are going to talk about one of the most important transformations in education, entitled The Paradigm Shift from Teacher-Centered to Learner-Centered Teaching. So, in introduction, education has undergone a profound transformation from traditional teacher-centered practice to learner-centered approaches. So, basically, education has never been static. It continuously evolves as society, culture, and technology change. Before, schools placed heavy emphasis on the teacher as the ultimate source of knowledge. Students were expected to sit quietly, listen, and absorb information. But in the 21st century, the century that we are living now, education has shifted its focus from the teacher as the center of learning to the learner as an active participant in the process. So basically, from teacher-centered to learner-centered. This paradigm shift had focused on teachers' authority to learner participation, and emphasis now lies on active learning, collaboration, and critical thinking. So this shift is not just a small adjustment, it completely changes how we view the classroom, the role of the teacher, and the role of every learners of or every student. Next slide. Teacher-centered. It is known as the traditional or conventional approach. The teacher functions in the familiar role of classroom lecturer, presenting information to the students who are expected to passively receive the knowledge being presented. While while the education is teacher-centered, the classroom remains orderly. Students are quiet, and the teacher retains full control of the classroom and its activities. So in a teacher-centered classroom, the teacher is the authority or the coach. This approach is often called traditional or conventional teaching. The teacher lectures, gives information, explains the concept, and the students passively receive it. And in this setup, the classroom is orderly, quiet, and controlled. Students raise their hands only when called upon, and the teacher decides everything: what to study, how to study, and when to study. A teacher centered approach ensures that everyone learns the same foundation knowledge in a systematic way. Okay, so next slide is the teacher centered philosophies. So the teacher-centered approach is grounded in strong educational philosophies. Two of the most influential are perennialism and essentialism. So let's first define what is perennialism. So it views truth as constant or perennial. The aim is to ensure that learners acquire knowledge. So perennialism believes that truth is constant or unchanging and universal. The goal of education is to expose learners to these enduring truths. The teacher's job is to make sure that students acquire the lasting knowledge, acquire the ideas, or acquire their skills. So the second one is the essentialism. So it holds that our culture has a core of common knowledge that these schools are obligated to transmit to learners in a systematic and disciplined way. So in essentialism, on the other hand, emphasizes that there is a core body of knowledge: reading, writing, any other subjects like math, science, or history that every student must learn. Because the teacher has the mastery of these essential skills in every subject, so learners can function as responsible members of the society. So in short, these philosophies highlight the teacher's authority, discipline, and structure. Next slide. So in contrast of teacher-centered, of course, there is student-centered or learner-centered. So learner-centered emphasizes the active participation of students in the learning process. This approach is based on the belief that students learn best when they are engaged in the learning process and have the opportunity to explore, experiment, and construct their own knowledge. The teacher is still the classroom authority figure but functions as more of a coach or facilitator, as what I have mentioned earlier. So, in this model, in this approach, students are encouraged to ask questions. Let them speak. Let them give ideas of their own. Let their imagination of ideas sparks inside the classroom. So it explores ideas and experiment, of course, and construct their own understanding. The teacher still plays an important role, but more as a coach, facilitator, or a guide. So let's imagine like a classroom where students work in groups, discuss real life problems, and ilan yung gi-apply what the usa lang ilang nakatuunan or usa lang ilang nakatuunan sa ilang mga case studies. So this is a learner centered way. So in simple terms, ang learner centered approach is where ang students mismo ilang gigamit ilang own skills, ilang own abilities, ilang own capabilities, ilang own what they call this, ilang own intelligence for a certain activities or for a certain projects. So this means na when we do learner-centered, the learning process is not just about memorizing information, just what the teacher-centered approach had highlighted, but about developing critical thinking, creativity, of course, collaboration, and communication skills. So this approach prepares learners not only to pass the exams, but also to face real life challenges and solve problems in the society, in also to the community. Okay, next slide. Of course, when earlier the teacher-centered approach has a philosophies, now also learner-centered had a philosophies. First is the progressivism and social reconstructionism. So let's first define what is progressivism. So attributed to the writings of John Dewey, progressivism is based on the belief that education should be child-centered rather than focused on the teacher. So progressivism is heavily influenced by the ideas of John Dewey. He believed that education should be a child-centered rather than teacher-centered because according to him, learning is most effective when it connects to the child's experiences and interests. So in simple terms, learning by doing. So makakataon ka pinaagi kung naka-experience ka ng butanga or imo nang gibuhat nga butanga. So and also he emphasizes learning by doing and preparing learners to participation in democratic society. So next is social reconstructionism. It highlights the need for various social reforms and, whenever possible, allow learners to have first-hand experiences in reform activities. So ang kaning social reconstructionism, it goes beyond the classroom. It sees education as a tool for solving social problems. So in terms of social problems outside the school, the society or the community, learners should not only study the world but also participate in reforming it. For example, they might engage in community projects, environmental campaigns, or service learning activities where they contribute to social change. So I think that's it for my part. And the next to be discussed is all about the advantages of a learner-centered approach, and it will be discussed by my co-member, namely Princess May Albon.
So good day everyone, especially to you, sir. For my part of the report, I'll be sharing the advantages and concepts of learner-centered teaching, the theorists who influenced it, and the philosophy behind it. Now, first we have the advantages. So, advantages of a learner-centered approach. First, it encourages participation. So when students are more involved, they are also more motivated to learn. For example, instead of the teacher explaining everything in front, students can work in groups to create a poster or presentation. So each member contributes an idea, so everyone is active in the lesson. So here, students don't just sit and listen. They become more part of the learning process. Okay? So now, let us proceed to the second advantage, which is it promotes critical thinking. So students are not just absorbing facts. They're also analyzing and questioning. For example, during class, students can have a debate about a school rule, like wearing uniforms. So they discuss the advantages and disadvantages. So then they can defend their points. So this way, students can practice forming their own opinions instead of just accepting what is told to them. Okay, gets? Now let us proceed to the concepts of learner-centered. So in old style of teaching, we all know that the teacher talk most of the time, and we students just listen. So, but in a learner-centered classroom, the focus is on the students being active. For example, instead of the teacher lecturing about a science experiment, the teacher lets the students or the ones performs the experiment in groups. So the teacher only guides the students and then asks questions like, what do you notice? Or why do you think this happened? So that makes the lesson more interactive and memorable. Now let us proceed to the theorists who influence learner-centered learning. We have Johann Henry Pestalozzi. He believed education should develop the whole child's mind, body, and emotions. For example, students can make a class project about their community where they gather information, design it creatively, and present it. So this develops the students both knowledge and values like teamwork. So we have here John Dewey. He promoted learning by doing. For example, instead of just reading about elections, the class can organize a mock voting activity so that students can nominate leaders, campaign, and vote. So this way, they don't just learn about elections, they also experience it. Next, we have John Piaget. So he said that children learn in stages and lessons should match their level of development. Lessons should match their level of development. For example, younger students, we may use pictures and flashcards to learn, diba? Students may use flashcards and pictures to learn, while older students solve real-life problems like budgeting a small amount of money for food. Now let us proceed to Jerome Bruner. So he believed that the teacher should act more like a guide. So instead of giving the correct answer immediately, the teacher asked, why do you think, or what do you think that will happen if we don't recycle? Or students share idea and come up with the answers themselves. Now let us proceed to the educational philosophy behind learner-centered learning. So the shift towards learner-centered learning is based on the principles of constructivism. So constructivism is a theory of learning that emphasizes the active construction of knowledge, experiences, and perceptions. Now, therefore, the learning process is unique to each individual, and the teacher's role is to facilitate learning by providing opportunities for exploration, experimentation, and reflection. Now, in a constructivist classroom, learning is constructed. Now, students tend to construct their future knowledge from already formulated knowledge in ideas and understanding. For example, a student who already learned about multiplication, so the student can use that skill to solve a real world problems like computing the price or computing the price of multiple items in a store. Next, we have active. Learning activities requires full participation. For example, instead of just listening to the lesson on healthy eating, students can prepare a simple food cart or a plan on a one-day healthy meal. So here, students are really engaged and the lesson becomes more meaningful. Okay? So to wrap it up, learner-centered teaching makes students active and critical thinkers. And theories like Pestalozzi, Dewey, Piaget, and Bruner, they shaped this approach, the learner-centered approach. And the philosophy of constructivism explains why it works, because students build knowledge best when they actively participate in their learning. Now, this approach helps us not only learn lessons in class, but also develop the skills we need to apply in real life. So note that this is very important. And that ends my report. So for the other important points of constructivism, this will be further discussed by Chris Mandido. So thank you everyone. That ends my report.
Okay, so good evening everyone, especially to you, Sir Torres. So I'm Chris Janbert B. Mandido and I will be the one to continue discussing constructivism. Okay, so let's start. As Albon stated that constructivism, this is all about a learning theory that talks about active learning and putting students at the center of their own education. It's a student-centered approach where students construct their own knowledge instead of just passively receiving it. So let's proceed to reflection. So when we say reflection, this is the students control their own learning process and they lead the way by reflecting on their own experiences. Meaning that reflection, students think about their experiences to control their own learning process. So that is reflection. So now let's proceed to collaboration, meaning that the collaboration, the constructive classroom relies heavily on collaboration among students, meaning that collaboration, working together with other students, is a big part of this approach because collaboration, this is the easiest way to easily understand the active. What I mean is activities. No, it's easy to understand the activities. So the third one is inquiry-based learning, meaning that students use inquiry methods to ask questions, investigate a topic, and use a variety of resources to find solution and answer. Meaning that inquiry-based learning, the student asks a question, investigate topics, and use different resources to find a solutions and answer. So that is for constructivism. So now let's proceed to connectivism. No, we also connectivism. This is a learning theory that highlights the crucial or essential role of technology and social networks. So when we say connectivism, it focuses on how learning happens by creating connections and networks between people, ideas, and resources. So as you can see here in the PowerPoint presentation, connectivism emphasizes the importance of technology and social networks in the learning process. Learning process of creating connections and networks between people, ideas, resources. Therefore, the learning process is not limited to the classroom, but extends to the wider community at the online world. Meaning that learning isn't limited to the classroom. It extends to the wider community and online world. So the second paragraph stated that one of the strengths of connectivism is its ability to promote personalized learning, learner engagement, and the use of technology in the learning process, meaning that it's a great way to promote a personalized learning and keep learners engaged through the use of technology. So now that is for connectivism. So our third topic is principles and practice of constructivism and connectivism, meaning this is the difference between the two, 5 bullet points of each topic. So the constructivism is the first one is we have active learning, student-centered, prior knowledge, scaffolding, and reflection. So connectivism. Okay, so connectivism, we have a 5 bullet points, which is network learning, digital technologies, what do we call it? Social learning, lifelong learning, and the last one is diversity. The learner-centered versus or traditional teaching. So as you can see here in the PowerPoint, so when we say learner-centered, teaching is like, it emphasizes discovery, active roles for students, and creative expressions. In these models, students even participate in making decisions about their learning. So now, let's proceed to traditional teaching. So traditional teaching, we have a traditional teaching, or what do we call this? So it emphasizes knowledge and work, with the teacher acting as the main distributor of information. Students are expected to take a more passive role, and all the decision making is firmly in the teacher's hand. So that is for my part or my discussion for today, and I thank you.
So, usa may mean aning paradigm shift sa atua as a student or as a future educator, or let's say as an individual, as an citizen. So it means that teaching is no longer about the teacher simply delivering knowledge, but about creating environments where learners actively engage, ask questions and construct meaning. So the traditional teacher-centered model gave us discipline. The teacher gives their knowledge passing to the students when the where the students do is just only to listen and focus on the essential discussions that what the teacher had mentioned. But the learner centered is more about to develop creativity, to develop the thinking skills of the learners or of the students, and have the adaptability, which is a skills much needed in today's complex world, in today's society nga nang need you to critique to every individuals to face and to solve the social problems. So, presenting with you are the references where we base our discussions for today. And of course, presenting with you are the group members, namely yours truly, Glenn Eliego, Princess May Albon, and Chris Jenbert Mundido. And that's it for our discussions for today. And on behalf of Group 1, I hope that you've learned something coming from us. And we say thank you.